So, CES 2020, AMD Laptops. What a cool time to be a fan of these beasts here. And there's about 5 laptops that I'm just going to briefly discuss today that have AMD CPUs in them. Some have an AMD GPU. And I really like one of them in particular, maybe 2 of them, and the others, they're okay. I'm glad they're here, okay? And I think the more of this, the more of these that we get, the better off we're going to be as a consumer, because the Intel, NVIDIA has been ruling the roost inside of machines like this, and rightfully deserved, as they have come out ahead of AMD when it comes to, performance per wattage and just thermal efficiency. Sounds funny given the current parts that we have for Intel and NVIDIA, but now AMD's got it in third gear with their foot on the gas, and they are coming on quick, and in some aspects they're even better, especially on the CPU side. But I want to talk about 3 things in particular about these CPUs that I think you should be made aware of before you pull the trigger on one. All right, the first is going to be the price. Just because it's AMD doesn't mean it's going to come out cheap. Expect these to be expensive. Early 2019, when those RTX cards came out, the price premium on those was ridiculous, and I expect this to be the same. 7 nanometer AMD. You mean to tell me I can get a 6-core 12-thread AMD chip? Wait, an 8-core 16-thread AMD chip? That's right, Bob, you can. But it's not going to come out cheap, so don't expect it to do so. Maybe give it some time and the price will come down. Regardless, let's hope this creates a little bit of a price war, throw some wrenches in the fans for the current Intel and NVIDIA solutions. Right on, I think that's great. Number 2, 8 cores and 16 threads. Most of you don't really need this, including myself, and you can throw the words future-proof out there all you want, but let's just keep something in mind. 6-core 12-thread is way more than enough for gaming across nearly every single title that's ever made. So there is that to consider. And when it comes to scalability of frame rate performance, so when you have to turn down some of those settings and still saturate that GPU to get that higher frame rate, the whole Intel and NVIDIA combination is still going to be better than what an all AMD solution is going to provide for you. So for someone like me, as I make videos, having those 16 threads would be spectacular. And that's something that I can definitely utilize more so than just the average Joe gamer out there, which honestly is going to be probably 95% of the people out there that are looking for these laptops anyway, just based on my comment section alone. I'm not trying to deter you from this CPU, but also realize that it doesn't have an identity crisis either. These high core CPUs are really good for content creation, but when it comes to gaming, they are working in a certain wattage here, so the instructions per clock could be a little bit lower based on the actual frequency these chips are going to potentially run at. And therefore, scaling for frame rate performance as you adjust settings may not have the nice impact and positive influence that you would see on a traditional AMD and NVIDIA rig. So just something to consider. And the big one that I think everyone has overlooked is the tunability on AMD CPUs. You're not going to use Intel's Extreme Tuning utility. That's an Intel-based software solution only for Intel CPUs. Throttle Stop is only working on Intel, and by no means is it ever going to work for AMD as far as I understand it. So when it comes to controlling your wattage and frequencies and voltage and just the overall tuning on an AMD CPU in a laptop, it doesn't exist. You are at the mercy of how it's set up from the factory, and then at best, you can apply new thermal paste. Generally speaking, that's how it's going to work. And I just want you to be aware of that, because you are going to be at the mercy of the manufacturer, its cooling solution, the BIOS. All those fancy tutorials and tweaks that I have been offering over the last few years will not apply here. I know, sad face, but that's something we're going to have to live with when these CPUs come out, and probably for quite some time, if not definitely. So let's talk about a couple of these laptops that I think should be on your radar. What about that Dell G5? Starting at $800, it is all plastics, probably going to have a pretty small battery, maybe that 57 watts, 60 watt hour at best. Expect a pretty low color gamut, low nit brightness, 60 hertz display for starters, but these should be able to get equipped with the Ryzen 7, I think it's a 6-core 12-thread, and I believe even the 8-core 16-thread, so could be compelling. Again, price is going to do all the talking here. I would also expect the RX 5600M on that. So this is going to be one of those laptops that it's going to look like a great value, like Dave will come out with a review on it, you know, and he'll show you like the top dog one, and you're going to think this is cool, and we know it's a starting price of $799, but when you spec out the version that he has before you, you know, it's like $1,700 or more. So that's going to be the biggest problem, I think, with that particular laptop, is that at its lowest end, it's not really going to have too much compelling, and as you start to spec it out, this is typical of Dell and their G series laptops. As you start to spec it out, you price yourself out so high that you might as well just get something that's ready to go for less with all of those parts inside. And that really is a shame, because I think this could be popular if the pricing and the scaling and everything involved with how much it's going to cost per what's inside was well balanced. But it is Dell, and they tend to hold a lot of things for ransom, meaning if you want a bigger battery, you got to spend, you know, $1,800 to $2,000 on a G series laptop. And that's exactly how it was shortly after CES in 2019. So I don't have high hopes for this machine because of that, but the potential is there, and it's just a shame that based on what I've seen them do in the past, I see no reason for this to be any different. So I think the most popular one has been the Asus G14. We've got this magnesium alloy deck, an aluminum lid, this weird optional, you know, 1000 LED configuration on the lid, so you can kind of customize it. Thank goodness that's optional. And what do we have here? I think that the Asus is getting a bin to 35 watts. Ryzen 8-core 16-thread that's going to be exclusive to them for maybe 6 or 12 months. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So that could be neat from a thermal standpoint. But there's no AMD GPU in those. It's going to be a maximum of an RTX 2060, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be a new max Q. So expect that to be limited to around maybe 65 watts or so. And that's probably going to be very expensive as well. But it is pretty compelling. You've got a full HD panel at 60 Hertz and 120 Hertz. My experience with the 120 Hertz panels from Asus have not been that bright and have had pretty low color gamut, but this is going to be a different size, and so therefore made totally from scratch, and maybe it'll be a nice display. 1440p at 60 Hertz is going to be included with this too, and booyah, right? That is pretty cool. That could be a very compelling option out there for many folks. And the battery, it's been up in the air on this. We're not really too sure what consists of the watt hours on the battery, but we do know the power supply unit is 180 watts, and it's not too terribly bulky. So it could be a pretty promising laptop, and I like that it's a new design. They brought something new, and they went a little bit smaller. Some of you wish maybe they went with a 16-inch, I'm sure, but at least it's something different, and I'm pretty excited about that personally. So what else do we have here? Oh, how about the Asus G15? Now that's based off the old Zephyrus chassis, the G502 kind of series, if I recall correctly. And that's going to have, you know, a lot of the things that the G14 has. I'm pretty excited about that one. I think the battery on that one's supposed to be pretty big as well. Expect FreeSync, 144 Hertz, 240 Hertz, only Full HD, so only 1080p on those. Oh, and both the G14 and G15 feature USB-C type charging, so good portability there. Not too sure how impactful it's going to be in the 15-inch model, but on the 14-inch model, I think a lot of people are going to be very happy. As long as the battery life is good on that, I think a lot of people are going to pick up that laptop, use it as a portable machine, and just sort of be a jack-of-all-trades kind of laptop. And again, I'm thinking you guys are the most excited for that one. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what do you think about this one? The Clevo-based chassis, a 15-inch laptop. They're coming out with a desktop processor, AMD flavor, of course, and that's pretty nice. As long as it's 65 watts or less, you'll be able to drop that AM4 socket AMD CPU desktop chip inside of this laptop. And it's because it's a Clevo model, it's not the most fancy looking. It's pretty plain Jane, very similar to the N970TF I reviewed, just from a very basic design language. It'll probably have a plastic trackpad, plastic dedicated buttons. The whole thing will be plastic, but it's 15 inches. And I believe the GPU capability in there is going to be NVIDIA. I'm really sad about that. I would like to see more AMD only solutions. Maybe we'll get there towards the end of 2020. But I believe they're going to allow a maximum of 115 watts inside of this particular chassis for the GPU. So that would leave it up to a 2070 Max P at best. And being Clevo, there's no boost mods or anything. That's a Tongfang solution. So you would not get a 1660 Ti with Electro Boost, for example. Again, that's a Tongfang, not Clevo thing. So this is a very basic laptop. And I think what's going to make or break this, just like anything else for that matter, is going to be the price. Like if this is really well priced, I'm talking, you know, if we can get Ryzen 3900 in there, 65 watt chip, with even a 1660 Ti and call it an 80 watt GPU, if we can get something like that for $13.99 with half a terabyte of storage, maybe 144 hertz FreeSync display, I know wishful thinking, but once it gets to that $1,600 price tag, now you're just buying it for the fact that it has an AMD desktop chip, and everything else that it's got going for it, or lack thereof, I think it may just sort of price itself out. But the initial pricing is going to look a little funny, I'm sure, and then 3 to 6 months down the road, when everything settles at the price that it probably should have launched at, perhaps that could be a pretty compelling offer. Last thing on the table that I want to talk about is the Asus TUF series. Never been a popular chassis. Ultimately, the 504 was really gimped with a cooling solution, and therefore the wattage was reduced on the CPU. The 505 tried to address this, but it still was sort of a hot mess, and it had a gamer aesthetic. And if you like that, great, but a lot of folks would prefer something a little bit more subtle. And I think subtle is going to be key on the new TUF series from Asus, because you can actually get this with a 90 watt hour battery. Now that's optional, and it's going to do away with the 2.5 inch drive, but assuming you want that big battery, assumes you're going to be more out and about, and therefore in a public environment. I mean, I'm assuming this here, but you probably want something a little more subtle. And the aluminum lid on this is much stiffer than before. It has these little rivets in the corner just for aesthetic, but that's a lot more tuned down as a gamer type looking laptop than what we had seen in the past. And I think that's pretty nice. And of course, what you're going to get inside is some more AMD love there. So I do like, who am I fooling here? I love that we're getting these AMD CPUs, as I'm hoping it throws some wrenches in the fan, maybe starts a little bit more, friendly competition back and forth between all these manufacturers and the parts that are inside. But when it comes to what we really did see at CES for AMD laptop-based solutions, at least in the gaming format, I think the G14 is going to be the most popular one, and everything else that we saw is just sort of looking. Some of the designs have been around for years, others have been around for 1 or 2 years. The honeymoon phase wore off, and I just wasn't that excited now as I was a week ago when these things were getting revealed, because I realized a lot of what we have here is just a CPU, and there's really not much more going for it. But that G14, I think, is really the money maker here, and I think that's going to do better than any of them. I look forward to getting my hands on any of these. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I know I left a lot of stuff out, but just want to let you know my thoughts on CES 2020 for AMD laptops. And I'm just giving you my honest opinion as somebody who's been following this market for years. I could kind of see what's going to happen right away, and then see how that's going to, be effect, 2, 3, 4, 6 months down the road. So I look forward to more AMD solutions, and that's going to do it for now. This is Bob of All Trades, and I'll see you in the next video.